everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This is Dave. I'm here with my co-host, Brandon. We are PVD Horror, and we are super excited today to have our guest, Ben Scrivens, the founder of Fright Rags, which we are huge fans of. We've been wearing that stuff since back in the day. Fright Rags started in 2003, which is crazy. And also, I'm kind of glad because Ben, that means you're our age, and that's awesome. So,
yeah.
So thanks so much for coming in, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
No problem. So, Ben, when we have guests on the show, I love to ask them how they got into horror and what was their first experience like watching a horror film. Can you share your stories with us?
Oh, absolutely. So, my intro into horror actually dates back to October 30th, 1981. And it was the network television premiere of Halloween. And I was 4 years old, so that meant nothing to me. It was because we were at a friend's house. We had these friends that we lived near in downtown Rochester. They had a deli that they owned, but they also lived like above it and like behind it and stuff. Like they lived in the building. And we were in the back of like their living room, and I'm the youngest of four, so my brothers and my sister were kind of off playing with the friends' kids and stuff, and my parents were hanging out, probably playing cards or something with those parents. And I was really bored and kept telling my mom I wanted to go home, and she's like, just go watch TV, like any 80s mom would say. And I just plopped down in front of the TV and turned it to a station, and it was literally the beginning of when Halloween started. So I heard the music and saw the pumpkin. I was like, what's this? And, up until that point, I was used to like Popeye and Scooby-Doo and stuff. And that just kind of blew my mind. But I don't remember being scared as much as I was just like fascinated, especially the closet scene, like seeing Michael coming through the closet with that mask. Of course, that's the one time you get to see it really close up, other than, he's on the phone and other times. But like it just was like, I wanted to see more of it. So that really captured me. I did get scared of it when I would see it later when I was a little bit older, but that initial viewing, I don't know that it gave me instant nightmares or anything. I was just like, what did I just watch? And where can I see more?
Is that scene right behind you?
It is actually. So this is a Edmiston poster from Mondo. In fact, I have the Michael Myers version of that at our office. And then I have, of course, that one. So, yeah. And it's funny because I'm actually wearing the shirt that we did. It's a TV ad for the first ever Halloween on TV, which is one of my favorites. So it's just kind of funny that I'm wearing it right now. But yeah.
And I think I own the Halloween shirt with that picture of Jamie Lee Curtis, but it's like this. It's like kind of like a collage of Halloween one.
Yes. Yep. Done a lot of Halloween stuff.
Yeah. Yes. Now, where's the main office located? Where are you guys based out of?
So we are in Rochester, New York. I'm currently in my house. I work a lot out of my house, but our main office is in downtown Rochester. It's actually the Old City Morgue that we have. It's pretty cool. That, I wish it was by design, but I was literally we were going on to our third office warehouse setup because we were growing. And so it was originally started out of my apartment. And then when I moved into my first house, it was out of there. And then I had to move to a small office. And then we expanded even in that area. And then we had to move to another office warehouse kind of thing. And then when that lease was up, we moved in, and I was looking for a place. I couldn't find a place, but this one kept coming up. And I was like, this looks gorgeous, but where is this? I know downtown Rochester pretty well. It's not like it's a huge city, but like I wasn't familiar with this one area. And I went down there and it was just great. And then the landlord was like, oh, it used to be the old morgue. And I was like, okay, well, that kind of seals the deal. So, and we've been for 10 years this year, which is great.
Awesome. Congrats.
Nice.
Thanks.
So, Ben, we are huge music fans. Can you share some of your favorite artists and albums that inspired you growing up?
So I'm a huge music fan as well. I play music. I was always in like choir and stuff growing up, but my love of music spans many genres. So I'll sit here and say, well, I love the Ramones, are my favorite band of all time. And of course, the Misfits. But then I'll sit here and tell you that I listen to Wilson Phillips constantly. and Radiohead, and then Pink Floyd. And it's almost like a ping pong thing where I could list out so many bands where it's just like, I don't know. So it's hard. It's almost hard to narrow it down. But I will say, like, in the sense of like, I mean, I was a big 80s metal fan growing up because of my brothers. So I was big into Rat and Def Leppard and still am, Motley Crue, Poison, all those bands. My one brother loved Rush. So I used to listen to a lot of Rush when I was young, and I still love Rush and was able to see them a few times.
Cool.
But, in terms of albums, picking one out, it's hard because I'm sure you guys are the same. Like, albums define times of your life,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
people would make fun of me for liking Wilson Phillips so much, but when I put on Wilson Phillips, I'm literally in 8th grade in my bedroom drawing comics and reading Fangoria. Like, so I listen to that a lot when I'm working because I can put myself immediately in a mindset that I need to be in, because the stuff that we do, we try to make things that we wanted growing up, and I'm instantly thinking of the Marvel cards I used to collect, you know what I mean? And all these tactile things. It really is like it's like a, in Harry Potter terms, it's like a port key, it's the only thing I can think of. So yeah, I mean, my love of music it spans so many genres. I look at my playlist, on my phone, and I actually put playlists in seasons a lot.
Okay.
And so I have like early summer and late summer, because that's different to me. And each song, like and the block of songs in there could actually be like, well, this block is from 1993 and this block is from 87 and this is from 99. You know what I mean? It's so,
Yeah.
this is the way my brain is, but when I hear a song, it takes me back to that time. So
Yeah. No, we had a recent conversation about music, and we were kind of talking about that. Like, your life kind of has a soundtrack.
yes.
And it's funny because, like, as you're saying that, I'm thinking there was an album that I won't probably share on here that, like, I probably would never listen to again because it reminded me of like a breakup when I was in like middle school.
Yeah,
and I was like
yeah,
devastated.
totally.
Yep.
I have a lot of that music, man. Like, it's funny. Like, I listen to one song, it just makes me think of it. Great White, Save Your Love, always makes me think of like 1989, 1990, and like my crush on Daniel Harris from Halloween 4 and Halloween 5. Like it's just an example of like, you take a song and you apply this like memory to it.
Yep.
And it's this instant recall, and I have so many of those,
I think movies can do that too at times, especially. So I'm sure, like I said, we're like similar age. I'm sure you remember like when the big thing would be like on a first date, taking them to the movies, where you would sit there and not talk to your date, most likely because you're watching the movie. And like, I remember early 90s or like probably even late 90s, like horror movies came out almost every weekend, it felt like. And like, I remember seeing like all the 90s, like, or up till when, I don't remember, but like some of the later Chucky films, like Halloween Resurrection, seeing those all as dates. And it's so funny to like think back at now and think about like who I was with at those times. And it's just fun thinking about that stuff.
Oh, so totally. Go ahead, Brandon. Sorry.
What was the first horror film you had taken a date to go see?
So it's funny you say that. So, I mean, my dating history is not that extensive because I've been with my wife for 28 years now. Like, we've been together since I was a senior in high school and she was and she was a freshman in college. So we've been together that long, and I had one girlfriend prior to that. But I will say, and my wife isn't into horror, but like when we were dating, she went to a lot more horror movies with me. Now that we're married, of course, and have kids, and she's not really into it. I mean, we love Halloween, like the holiday. Like, she's all gung ho about decorating and stuff and getting dressed up and parties and stuff. And she will watch, some movies with me. She's just not totally into it.
Yeah.
But so she and I had gone to a bunch of movies around that time. But I remember distinctly the one girlfriend I had in high school before her, we went to go see Jason Goes to Hell together.
Oh, man.
It was a great experience because that wasn't the first Friday movie I'd seen in the theater, but it's definitely the first one I saw on my own. Like, I don't even know, like, I think we went with like a friend and he might have driven or something. So that was what, 93? Is that right? Yeah, it must have been, right? So I don't think I have my license just yet. But anyway, I just remember the theater being packed and like raucous. And then when that glove came up at the end, people were flipping out. And like, I remember that kind of experience.
Yeah.
More than I necessarily remember being with my girlfriend, but like, it was just, it was just great.
It doesn't feel like movies are like that anymore. Like, I remember seeing Independence Day and Godzilla and the Matthew Broderick Godzilla.
Yeah, 98.
The
Yeah.
theater
Or-
was
yeah,
insane for those films.
Mhm.
Like I just remember going in, you had to sit front row, so your neck's
Yeah,
next straight up, and it was just like it felt like everybody was super loud and excited when the movie was starting, and yeah, I never have that experience anymore. Like I never go to a theater.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah.
I worry when I go to the theater now because I just worry about idiots, being on the phone, being loud. And
Yes.
to be completely honest, I don't go to the movie theater that often anymore. We do a weekly or a monthly series at a local art house theater. It's one of the oldest theaters in Rochester called Saturday Night Rewind. That's what we call our series. The theater's called The Little, and we are able to curate screenings. So we do all these retro screens. I actually have an original print of Halloween 4 that we've shown, 35 millimeter print.
Nice.
I have an original one of Halloween as well that we've shown, but we show all sorts of movies, mostly horror. And that's great because you're getting basically a bunch of friends together to watch this movie together. Yeah. But when it's like a newer film, I mean, right behind me and behind that wall, I have a theater room, and I have, it's a 110-inch screen projector. I have 7.12 surround sound. I've got the chairs that rumble. I've got a nice enough setup where, to me, I'm like, I'll just wait for it to come home because then I can go in there and watch it in my pajamas, have a couple drinks, pause it to go to the bathroom, and then go to bed when I'm done. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on that part of the theatrical experience other than that communal experience, which I do know is it's a real thing. It's just, it sucks when you pay all this money and you sit down and then you got some jerk behind you or in front of you on your phone and you're like, you know what? Why did I even bother? And it sucks.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the conversations we've had recently is about prior to Brandon and I meeting and becoming friends, like we really didn't have like a horror community or like people in our lives that we were able to kind of share our love for horror with. And that kind of changed when we became friends. And then when we just started to do PVD horror, we decided we were going to try to build our own community here in Rhode Island. So I'm just curious, before you had Fright Rags, did you have like people that shared your passion for horror, and what does it look like now? It sounds like you're building a community as well with the screenings you're doing too.
Yeah. So pre Fright Rags, it was hard. Like growing up, I was the one into horror of my friend group. I did have a close friend who actually was one of my best friends growing up. He was my first employee, actually. He and I would watch horror a lot together. It was just him and I. And we had like 4 of us in the neighborhood, and he and I specifically would watch horror a lot. And then the other 2 would watch horror with us. They liked it too, but they weren't as into it as like we were. And mostly me, but he and I were. As we grew up, like I would meet people that were kind of into it, but I was sort of on my own to a large degree, other than my friend Tim. Trying to think of other people. I did have other friends that were sort of into it, but again, I was the one reading the Fangorias and reading all about these movies, and like I loved it. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, watch this movie or whatever. It was like, no, I love this. And then even before Fright Rags, I started getting into horror forums. As soon as, no joke, like the first time I ever went on the internet was, I think it was like January of '96, and like I think the first thing I ever typed in was like Halloween. And of course, there was a couple sites, but then there were forums, within the first couple of years. And so I would sort of not lurk, because I would engage too in forums. I started meeting people on forums, but it was a little bit disjointed back then. I mean, people definitely became internet friends and stuff, but I wouldn't say that I was like in it all too much until closer to starting Fright Rags. I became really good friends with a guy by the name of Justin Mabry, who had a forum called Night Owl Forums. He made the best Michael Myers masks ever. Funny enough, he went on to start Trick or Treat Studios and actually helped design the Myers mask that you see in 2018 and Kills and Ends. So, but he and I became really, we would have, ask my wife, we'd be on the phone for like 7 or 8 hours at a time. It was crazy. And, he's actually really the one that helped me start Fright Rags, because I had the ideas and I showed him my designs, and he's like, hey, I'm going to put these in my forum to show people. And people liked it. And just a little bit of that positive feedback in a public forum was enough for me to pull the trigger just to start this thing and get it off the ground. So it's like that kindling,
Yeah.
And I always credit him for that. And we're still great friends to this day. And that really started at that point. You know, you start meeting tons of people and through conventions or just the website and customers and stuff. So now I have so many friends that I've met through Fright Rags, and friends that I've met that I've like are dear friends and like almost like family to me. I've even been lucky to befriend, you know, people from movies that I grew up watching and that become really close friends, which is crazy. And then of course locally, same thing. Yeah, I mean, we would go to, you know, even some art house theaters that would show movies like Halloween or something once in a while, and you'd meet people locally and like, there's people in Rochester that love horror. And now, like when we hold these screenings, it's like you see the same people, and there is definitely a community here, which is awesome because, you know, we're not in LA, right? We're not in Boston, we're not in Chicago or New York. We're in Rochester, and I love Rochester. And for us to be able to like have a theater that we can work with and show almost whatever we want and have people come out. Like we had PJ Souls here, and we had Joe Bob here a few times. And, you know, like having people come out and being able to like help, you know, do all of that and have all these people in Rochester. They don't have to travel, you know what I mean? We have people traveling to Rochester for it, you know, and it's incredibly rewarding to be a part of that.
Yeah. You know, Ben, you know, I loved when you used to go on your Snapchat rants like back in like 2016.
Yeah.
You've always been willing to help and motivate people. So I just want to tell you, you definitely inspired me to push horror content over the years. You know, I had like conversations with you on Snapchat. I would sit there and say, like, just pick your brain. And I was like, cool, because you would sit there and message back. And like, you know, I was sitting there trying to get my brother to kind of do some content for you. It fell through because he didn't sit there and follow through on what he was supposed to do. But, you know, it was so cool to kind of, you know, get that feedback from you and see that, you know, that you're just this cool, down to earth person, and like you're still the same today, man. So I just want to say I appreciate you, and thanks for sitting there and motivating the whole horror community to, you know, do positive things.
Thanks, man. That means a lot. It really does. I mean, it's funny you say that because that Snapchat thing, I remember just getting on there and it didn't feel like anybody was watching, which was actually great because it didn't make me feel self-conscious because I just felt like I was talking to my phone. And then I started getting feedback from people, which was really, I didn't expect it. So I appreciate that a lot because it is true. I do get people asking me questions about how I started or what I'm doing and everything. And I know it's cliche, but it's true. It's like, if I can do this, anybody can. And it's like, it's not, look, when I started this thing, I knew zero about business. It's not like I had some business degree or whatever. Like, I mean, I had a graphic design degree, so I had a little bit of a design sense, but I mean, I've learned so much by failing, and that's the point. Like a lot of people think, oh, you're smart or this or that. I'm like, or, you know, whatever it is. And I'm just like, no, man, I've failed a million times to get here, and I will continue to fail. It's literally all about failing. Like learning from your mistakes. You just keep learning from the crap that you're doing wrong. That's all I'm doing for the most part, you know?
So Ben, like, I think that, like you said, it's hard for some people, like you to like approach the idea that like I might fail at this, but I should probably take this chance. And I know something like starting up a business can be really tough, like both mentally and financially. So I just was curious, like, what are some of the mental and financial hurdles that you had to overcome in order to start Fright Rags?
So, you know, starting it, it's funny. I started it with $600 on my credit card, which I did not know how I was going to pay back. My wife and I were getting ready to get married, so we were planning a wedding. And so $600 at that time was a lot of money, but it also wasn't insurmountable. It's not like I mortgaged a house or, you know, took out some major personal loan for like thousands and thousands of dollars. So the barrier for me, and you know, this is 2003, so it was low back then. It's even lower now because of, you know, how easy you can set up a website and everything. I mean, I had to hand code everything when I started, but that aside, technologically aside, the financial barrier was pretty low. And to me, it was about not stopping. Like, you know, when we moved into our house and everything, you know, you start to have kids and stuff, you're like, maybe I should just like not do this because like I haven't had an order in like 2 weeks, you know. And then all of a sudden somebody from Australia would order and I'd be like, oh, that's so weird, like they found me, you know, like that's crazy, maybe I'll just keep going with it. So it was really just it was a complete labor of love. I didn't quit my full-time job until 5 years after starting Fright Rags, and I didn't really pay myself until then. So it was all because I wanted to do it. And even today, obviously, we're a business. We have to make money. I have to keep an eye on all of those things. But we don't sit around talking about how much money we can make. It's more about what's the product that we want to put out, and engineer it from there.
Yeah.
But, there were times, there was a time about 10 years ago that, I had gotten a loan out. I had taken a line of credit, the first time I'd ever done anything like that, because we were growing. We started to actually get licensing. I had a few employees in an office. I mean, overhead starts getting higher. And I remember it was actually 10 years ago, the 35th anniversary of Halloween. It was the first convention we did for the Halloween convention out in LA. And it was just, I only had 2 employees at the time, 3 really. And it was the 3 of us out there for the show. And I remember thinking, I maxed out my credit card. I was paying more than the minimum every month, of course, but I wasn't being able to really get into the balance too much. And it was getting up there. I had the line of credit I'd taken out, and I'd already maxed that out. It was gone. Like, I didn't have any more money, and I owed that money. And, it's one of those things where you stop and go, what am I going to do? And it really puts your feet in the fire and makes you go, how do I get myself out of this without just constantly getting into more debt and asking for more money? And again, at the time, learning all of what it takes to run a business, I was so not ignorant. I just didn't know what I didn't know at the time. So I was literally winging it. And when you're winging, trying to run a business and trying to come up with new ideas and put out products and making sure, inventory is being taken care of and your employees are, all of these things, I ended up I read a lot of books, and one book stuck out to me that changed my mind completely and started making me look at the numbers way differently. And you just start changing what you're doing and you start thinking of different ways. And so at that point, it was really about trying something out, trying different things, and slowly but surely started working out, and you start getting, a little bit out of debt and out, and to the point where it's like, okay, you can pay off the credit card, pay off the line of credit. Like, fast forward, we've had a sizable line of credit now at our bank that I haven't touched in 5 years. I don't need it, which is great because it's there for us, but I don't need it. So, but I am the type of person, and again, I implore anybody who wants to start anything like this, is never stop learning. It's failing, but it's learning, and always be curious and always ask questions, and always, like, I've always been the youngest in my group, like my family and other things like that. So I've always I've always had that mental, like I've felt the youngest even when I'm not. So to me, that's always like, then I don't know what they know. So I'm always coming from a perspective of, I need to learn more. And there are times where I'll talk to somebody that I thought has all their shit together, and I realize that they don't know what they're doing, and I have to be the ones like doing, what are you doing? This is what you got to do. And like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm like, you didn't know that? Like, to me, that's common sense, and not in a, derogatory way or a mean way. It's just, to me, I just assumed that everybody knew this because I know it. If I know it, then everybody must know it, right? There's no way I know something that nobody else does, or the person does. So if that makes any sense.
No, it totally does.
Totally. Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like, there was 3 of us in a group, now there's 2 of us. You just over the years, you just go through so many changes, because we just started, like you do film screenings. We started doing film screenings, and then it just got to a whole nother level where we had to take care of like all the licensing and everything. And then just going through different changes and it becoming a business, and things became harder, and so you just try to go through everything, and you just looking at it from in the past, like, oh man, it used to be fun doing this, but now you got to deal with all this shit. And so it's not as fun, but you try to make the best of it,
Oh yeah, man. Some people think like, oh, you get to just sit around and make stuff for horror movies all day. I'm like, well, yeah, that's definitely, believe me, I'm not complaining about my job, but holy shit, can it be wicked stressful, like to the point where you're like, what is, and it's never to a point where like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's just like, you're so stressed, and 99% of the time it's because you just want to make people happy. Like that's all you really want to do. And there are so many barriers in place now when you have licensing, and there's so many factors that you just literally, there have been times where I've had to like scream at people on the phone and be like, you don't understand. Like, we need to do this now, because if we don't, it's people aren't going to get their shit, you know? And it's like, and I'm not that type of person, but there are times where you're just like, you know, a lot of times when you're dealing with studios and stuff, and it's like, you don't get, like, they don't, it's not like they don't care, but they don't get it, you know? And we're on the other end going, you don't understand, like, this movie's coming out this time. We need to get this stuff out now because people want to wear it to the movie, or, you know, something like that, you know, things like that. And there's other situations where it's just like, oh my God. And you're dealing with a lot of people that either don't care or don't know, and you're trying to explain it to them. But yeah, anyway, I feel your pain. That's what I'm saying.
But, you know, Ben, you know, on the next note, it's really cool to see people in our community with our logo on their shirts. What was it like seeing someone with a Fright Rag shirt for the first time?
Oh man, I remember the first convention I ever did was 2004. It was Monster Mania in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And so, I mean, I was, you know, still, I mean, very, very, very small. But at that time, I was putting the logo on the back of our shirts, right? Like and the neck, right? On the very back, on the outside of the shirt, I should say. And I'd set up my table and I'd gone out to get something to eat before the show started. And when I walked through the lobby to go back to the table, all these people were lined up to get in, and I was walking from behind them, and I could just see Fright Rags, Fright Rags, Fright Rags, Fright Rags. And I was like, whoa, like that was my first experience seeing it like in the wild. And now it's fun. Like, if I like, there'll be places where I go sometimes where I'm like, hey, that's one of our shirts, or like you'll see it somewhere, and it never gets old. Like, even at conventions now where, you know, you're almost guaranteed to see a lot of them, you know, and obviously other people's too, and that's fine. But like, it's like, I love seeing which ones where I'm like, oh my God, that's an old one, or holy cow, like you've been a customer for 15 years, because last time we put that out was, you know, like 2008 or whatever. So it's a trip, man. It's because, you know, when you're behind a screen and you're doing this work from a computer and at the office, or even just here at my house by myself, you know, you kind of lose it a little. I mean, you see it online in social media, and I see people posting all the time, which is, again, amazing. But when you're out there and you see people just walking around, and the other thing is, like, at a convention, someone chose to wear that day. They're going to be around their people. They're going to be around like-minded people, horror fans, all this stuff. And they chose to wear that shirt of ours. To me, that's even better, because that's their uniform, right? Like, that's their costume, that's their thing, right? Or, you know, it's not a fucking costume. We know that. It's a way of life. But that's cool. But the funny thing to me, though, is when I never get stopped when I'm out. Like, it's about my shirts, not me. Like, I actually have gotten stopped because they recognize me, which is, that's a whole other trip. But like, the shirts, like, I'll have people be like, oh man, I get so many comments on the shirt. And I'm like, I get nothing. Unless they recognize me, you know. It's funny.
So the evolution of the horror tee is kind of a fascinating one, because I remember like early days, probably like pre-Fright Rags, or maybe like early Fright Rags time, when it was like a generic like movie poster would be on the shirt or something like that. It wasn't like these elaborate designs like we see today. And then comes Fright Rags, and we start to see like cool like original poster art and stuff like that. And I feel like it just kind of blew up. Like, suddenly, you know, after a little bit, you start seeing other companies popping up, and everybody's got these really cool designs. But like, prior to that, do you remember those early days and like trying to push designs that were like not the conventional, just like movie poster?
Oh yeah. I mean, when I first started, you know, I looked up I would say there was maybe two companies, one being, to me, better and bigger than the other one. So there was Blue Grape, which I think they kind of dealt with a lot of just everything, you know, like, I don't want to say generic, but they had a lot of music tees, and I think they had some movie tees, but it wasn't very deep. But it was like, I could get an official Halloween shirt from them, but it was just like, it was pretty basic. But Rotten Cotton was really the guy.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
The one. And so, but I knew I didn't want to be like him. I mean, he had definitely a very negative online persona. I mean, he had a part on a site called Hate Mail, and he would just literally put people's names and addresses that didn't pay, which is insane to me. But I've gotten to, you know Sean a little bit over the years. I mean, in the early days, it was definitely some contention there. But he and I became friends later on, and he's a really good dude, and I have no issues with him at all or anything. But he, it was Rotten Cotton, but I didn't want to be Rotten Cotton. I wanted to be what I wanted to be. And at the time, one of my first designs was What Would Jason Do, which was a parody, right? So it was a WW Hockey Mask D. And to me, that spoke to my sense of humor and the fact that I was a horror fan. But I also wanted to do straight up horror shirts, and I was doing the designs early on. I mean, they weren't that good, but I mean, I was trying to do something different. And it's funny to the point where Chaz Balin, who, if you know him, he wrote for Fangoria and Gorezone, and he was this amazing artist. He was the Rotten Cotton guy, and he came to me wanting to do artwork for me. And I turned him down 3 times. And I'm like, what am I doing turning this guy down? But I didn't. I'm like, you're the Rotten Cotton guy, though. Like, if you do work for us or me, I'm going to look like Rotten Cotton. And I don't want, I'm trying to be different. Until the point where I said, okay, why don't we do this and change it a different way and do different colors and stuff. So that way it's his art, but the colors are different. And it's not the one that we did that was really like basically a Rotten Cotton one was House by the Cemetery. I look back at that and go, that could have just been a Rotten Cotton design. But other ones we did, like Atkins, Thrill Me, and there's a few others that he did that I felt were different enough, at least in my mind. But I was always cognizant of that. I always wanted to be different. And there were a few t-shirt companies back then that were trying to do different things, and they, almost all of them fizzled out after a couple of years, which I completely understand. I mean, I think I was either too stubborn or too stupid or both just to keep going with it, because I just wouldn't stop doing it,
Sure.
And then, time comes along, and we were kept trying to push the envelope with our printing. I mean, we grew out of the guy that did it out of his garage for the first 5 years of the business. Then we went to another company, and then we just kept pushing to try to get the best printing we could. Funny enough, we had, ended up going to Detroit for a printer, and then all the way back to Rochester, where now we have the best printers in the business, and they're a mile down the street from us, So funny enough that it all came back to Rochester, and which is great, because not that I mind doing it somewhere else, but it's great to be able to go see the stuff on press. I mean, I'm really good friends with the owner, and we go out to, breakfast every week. And so, we're almost like not partners, but like we're like a family, and my niece works there full time. Tansky, our production manager, his son works there full time. I mean, it's great. And also, like, Rochester pride a little bit, it's printed right in town. It is a source of pride for me, because it's where I'm born and raised. So but yeah, it's been interesting to see the evolution of the horror t-shirt game over the last 20 years. And I'm pleased and grateful to be, relevant, but also thriving, 20 years later. And that's the thing, like, our biggest competition is ourselves. I'm always looking at things like, we can do better than this, even though, you're only as good as your last release. So we're always trying to push things and try to figure out what we can do better all the time.
That's exactly what I was gonna say next, is just along the lines of like, what has kept you guys relevant. I think there's a few things. First of all, I'll just tell you this, like, you guys, your online presence and your ability to like interact with people, like early on, that was important for me. Like, I remember once I got a shirt, and I think it was like the size, like I wasn't sure if the size was gonna, and like I just contacted I think I reached out on like Instagram and was able to interact on there and just kind of like talk to somebody, and they were like very like just quick to respond, and it felt good to like actually know that like on the other side they cared that I got a product that I actually like enjoyed, but the other thing is, like, you guys are constantly kind of morphing and trying to find new products and new ways. Like, so a while back, it struck me because you had a couple of releases that weren't technically horror, but it was very much in the realm of like what 80s people who love 80s horror would probably also like. Like, I think you did a Back to the Future release, and there was another one which is escaping me now, but I was like, I get it though, because at the same time, like the group it's reaching would also have an appreciation for a film like that. And then you guys are doing like different products, not just clothing. There's been merch, board games. I'm a huge fan of the socks. Like, I have so many pairs of the socks. The figures. I mean, you're just kind of evolving, and you're not just kind of getting stuck into this one thing, which obviously is tough when all this different competition comes up.
Sure.
I was kind of curious, like, what's the process of this, like, coming up with the new ideas, and also kind of on like a more humorous note, what kind of crazy, ridiculous, or like unusual ideas have you guys decided to scrap, and probably was best for not?
That's interesting. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, sometimes I look at it and I go, man, what are we, schizophrenic? Like, and look, I blame myself because I bring this on myself. Like, obviously everyone on my team has great ideas, and I'm not saying that I'm the one that comes up with all the ideas, but I'm definitely a driving force and just like, we got to do this, and in some cases, like, for example, lounge pants came about because my wife had bought me this pair of lounge pants from like Kohl's or something, and they were just black lounge pants, but I wore them all the time. They were super comfortable, and I was thinking about it, I'm like, these would be pretty cool with like some designs on them. And so I literally sent them to China, to this factory that we work with. I'm like, can you do something like this? I'm like, yep. And they sent me back a sample pair, and I was like, oh yeah, we got to do this now. And we started out doing lounge pants, and now we do lounge pants. And similar thing with socks. I was walking around a convention, like one of the apparel shows out in Vegas, and I was looking at socks. I'm like, I think we should do socks, because not everybody can wear, their horror shirt to their place of work. And I've had people like security guards being like, hey, I'm still rocking your stuff, and they'll like pull up the pant leg a little bit, And I'm like, yeah, that works. Other things have come about, like the figures. I knew my friend Mark, who started Plastic Meatball. He and I are have become friends a bit, and we knew each other before he even started that. And he's like, hey, we should do some figures together. I'm like, that would be really cool. What should we do? And again, there's other players in the 3 3/4 inch figure game. It's not like we're the only ones doing it. So it's like, what can we do that's different that people aren't doing? Like the Halloween figures, of course, Michael has been done. I get that. But I mean, if you're going to do Halloween figures, you got to do Michael. But shit, let's do Laurie. Let's do Linda. Let's do Annie. Let's do Sheriff Brackett. Let's do Loomis. Let's do all the characters we can do. Now, we're lucky with Halloween because we're able to do those characters. A lot of movies won't let you do characters because of likeness, and that becomes an issue. But we're trying to work with that, and there's other properties we're going to be doing them for coming up in the next couple of years. We've already got like a slate of other properties, including more for Halloween, which is crazy to me that we're still doing it, which is awesome. So a lot of that's organic. Same thing with the board games. Scott is a good friend of mine. He's the one that owns Silent Night, Deadly Night. Scott Schneidy was the original writer, and he got me in touch with Anthony, who I've kind of known throughout the years, Anthony Massey, and we became, good friends and started working on these board games. He had this idea. So again, it sort of just started organically and blossomed, and now we've just got, a lot of categories. I'm trying to think of something that we put the kibosh on. There hasn't really been anything that I can think. I mean, one thing that we cooled off on a little bit, partly because of COVID, was the mini masks. We had just released some mini masks. We had done some prior to COVID, and then we did some like in January before COVID, and they did okay. So we used to do like the big style Ben Cooper Collegeville masks in the box, and we would put a shirt in them. And I love them because, again, we're all the same age growing up having those costumes, but to display that on a shelf. I mean, look, when you're kids, it's utilitarian. You wear it for one night and then it goes into a bin or you throw it out. I mean, it wasn't something you cherished as a kid. It's only as adults now that we looked at it as a collectible. And as a collectible, you want to put it on a shelf or display it on a wall. And to me, it's either you make it really big, like Retro Go-Go has these really big ones that become wall pieces, which are awesome. Or to me, you make it the size of like a DVD and you put it on a shelf, and that way you've got the look and feel of it, but it's not an actual wearable mask, which is, it's so funny to me. People are like, you can't wear that mask, or is that mask for a cat? And I'm like, no, it's the idea of a mask. It's like, you can have a little replica guitar or gun, but it doesn't mean it works. Like it's the idea of it. It's the idea of it. You don't have to wear it, But the Halloween 3 ones have done really good for us, and we've got some more in the works. So I wouldn't say, and we didn't stop doing those. We just kind of paused it for a bit. But I mean, God, that was right during COVID, and then we started doing lunch boxes and other figures and stuff. So it's been wild.
Now that you've gone this route with like different types of products, it's literally never ending.
Yeah.
Like it only ends when you stop having ideas.
Mhm.
That's crazy. The potential for that is crazy.
Right. And again, you also butt up against licensing and what they will allow you to do. And
Yeah.
other companies have similar categories and stuff. So there's always like bumps in the road. But,
Yeah.
you know, even the trading cards, like that was something where I'm like, well, I want to have Halloween trading cards or Evil Dead trading cards or Reanimator trading cards. Why can't we do them? But that's a hard one to do with a lot of properties because you just aren't allowed to use a lot of stuff for movies. But man, I've been really happy about the ones we've done so far because they're still properties I love, you know?
Yeah.
Do you know if you were one of the first ones to put in extra, like the little, like there would be like a sticker, a card in the package? Were you one of the first companies to do that, or was that kind of something that you were inspired by other companies to do?
Well, I was inspired. So, I mean, we were definitely, to my knowledge, because when I started doing it, there really wasn't many other, at least horror shirt companies out there, period, or doing anything like that. So I know in terms of horror shirt companies, I would be safe to say that I was the first because this was going back to like 2000 when I started putting stuff into bags. Well, I first started putting Fright Flicks into bags, those Fright Flicks trading cards. But the problem with those is buying them on eBay, the prices fluctuated so much. So I couldn't control the pricing. So I'm like, well, I'm going to make my own trading cards then. And I think I started doing that, I want to say 2008, 2007. I don't remember. But I was putting trading cards in before that. But I got the inspiration from who became a really good friend of mine. I don't know if you guys know him, but Johnny Cupcakes, he's out of Boston.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Johnny's a good friend of mine. And when I bought from him years ago, like 2005, 2006, and something, and he sent this, like, I think it was like a Saved by the Bell trading card and like a mint that it was like packaged in a little thing that had his logo on it. And I was like, that's really cool. And I'm like, you know, let's do Fright Flicks because those are horror cards. And instead of a mint, I remember when I was a kid, my friend dared me to put 10 tearjerker sour ball candy balls in my mouth. And I did, and I held them there, and I legit burned all my taste buds off to the point where I couldn't taste anymore. I was actually getting worried. And like 4 days later, this is gross, but I woke up and I had this like white film on my tongue, and I peeled it off. It was all my dead taste buds in like one sheet, which is wild. But I mean, that's the shit you do when you're a kid. And I'm like,
did you keep it?
No, yeah, no, yeah, I saved it for later. That just made me think of a gold number. But no, I was like, well, I loved sour candy, I loved warheads, I loved tearjerkers, I loved all this stuff. So I'm like, I'm gonna start putting warheads in people's orders just to do it because to me it was like it's a dare thing, and people would ask like, why did I get a warhead? Like, what? Why? And I'm like, because when we were kids, we would dare each other to eat these things, and like, and you could kind of go, you see them be like, oh, cool, like, oh, so it's just having fun. I'm like, yeah, it's just fun. It's just fun. Like, have a good time. Like, and if you don't want it, give it to somebody or throw it out. I don't, whatever. I don't care. But we literally ordered them this is a couple of years ago. We actually started ordering directly from the company. We used to get them from suppliers, and we ordered a pallet of warheads. Like, it was like 50,000 pieces of warheads or more or something like that. It was insane. Like we've gone through, I forget, I tried to figure it out. It was like over 1 million warhead candies or something since we started doing it. It's something crazy. We had to use toxic waste for a little while because we couldn't get our hands on warheads, but it's all kind of the same, I do prefer a warhead over a toxic waste. The toxic waste will get the job done, But to me, it's always about, and then the stickers, right? So it's just about fun. And I always want to keep doing that. Like, I remember somebody wrote a note on their order. This is years ago. He's like, hey, thanks for including the shirt in my warhead order. And so we ended up taking a whole bag of warheads and putting it in his bag and mailing it to him.
That's
with
awesome.
the shirt. It's just, I don't know. You got to have fun, man. You got to have fun.
I love the stickers. I have a huge collection of those. I think they're so cool. And I love that anticipation. Sometimes it's like, not saying maybe not as, but like it can be just as exciting as getting the shirts. Like, what sticker am I going to get this time?
I've heard that from people, and even the cards. And people ask me if we're going to sell the cards, and I'm honest. I'm like, I have no plans on selling those cards because to me, if you can buy it, it's like there might be a situation down the line where I'm like, oh, we should just do like a limited pack or something. But like, or if ones we're never going to print again or so, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But like, I don't like the idea of just having it something that you can just buy and have. Like if you're missing card 7 from 10 series, like there's something cool about the hunt or like asking people on Facebook. I mean, I wouldn't want people to pay money on eBay and pay exorbitant prices. I mean, I hope that's not the case, but like I don't know. To me, there's something about these days you can get everything all the time. It seems like it's always available, and again, sometimes for a price. But like, I don't know. I miss the days of like searching for like import CDs or like, oh, you heard about this one band's track that you're trying to get somewhere through a friend. Like, I don't know. I just want to impart some of that into what we do.
Yeah. I mean, if you collected cards as a kid, you had a ton of like unfinished sets of cards.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's funny because I had ordered the Lost Boy collection, and I was opening up the package, and like the candy and cards fell out, and then my stepdaughter was trying to take it. I'm like, oh, this is my stuff. Like,
That's great. That's great.
I'm like, nope.
That's awesome.
You know, Ben, so over the years, you have featured so many up and coming artists to design shirts and more. What is the process like picking an artist?
That's a good question. You know, we see a lot of people, especially now on like Instagram and other platforms. I mean, before it was a little bit, I don't want to say harder to find people, but it was harder to kind of come across people nowadays. It's almost easier because you're just on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
You know, we've worked with some people that we've worked with for the longest, like Justin Osborne, who did the shirt that you're wearing, Dave, the Howling 4. And then Brandon, the one that you're wearing, the Pet Cemetery, that's Kyle Crawford. Those two guys, I've known Kyle for years and years. In fact, he has a brand called Electric Zombie, and we became friends. He wrote me because he found out about me through a mutual friend. But anyway, we became friends. This was years ago. And then Justin Osborne reached out to me in like 2010. And he just, you know, I just loved his style so much. And I was like, man, I got to work with you. So those two we've worked with the longest, and they're exclusive to us because they really have helped define the brand. I mean, they have. I mean, you know, everything they do is just awesome. And I've really enjoyed the collaboration we have with them. The other artists that we use, it's when you find somebody, I always try to look at someone's art and say, okay, I love when they do a certain style, and that's, you know, like Yannick Bouchard, who goes by Mauchi T. A lot of people use him now. When I first saw his style, I'm like, he is so perfect for this idea we have for like a pulp novel, because his work is so painterly, but it has this style to it. It's always about it's like an ingredient. Like, how can we use this ingredient in something that we're making? And I always want to find a piece for it. So it does spawn ideas, but like, a lot of times it's just as easy as like, hey, reaching out to somebody that you like their stuff and like, hey, would you want to work together? And then just seeing if they're available, what their fees are, like what their whole deal is. And honestly, for me, I love working with artists. So a lot of times, you know, Justin and Kyle kind of know the drill, obviously, at this point. But like, if it's a new person or something, it's like, all right, here's an idea we have, or like, here's the property. You can't do this, or this, because you can't use this person's face. You can't use this. You can't do that. So there's limitations. Come up with some ideas. Like, it's almost like dealer's choice. And like Justin and Kyle are very much like that. I mean, Kyle, because Kyle's very prolific for us. Like, Justin takes a long time to do his art, which makes sense because his artwork is like painted masterpieces. Yeah. So for him, he might do only like, I don't know, 10 or 12 for us in a year, but like, they're very curated, and it's like, okay, Halloween 4, Justin, go. And, you know, or like once in a while I'll be like, here's an idea I have, and I'll sketch it out loosely so he knows the direction. But a lot of times I'll just be like, go for it. With Kyle, it's like, all right, we want this kind of thing, or I'll be like, hey, do what you want. I just had a conversation with him this morning for an upcoming property. He's like, hey, what kind of style are you thinking? I'm like, honestly, I haven't really thought about it. But let's go with this type of thing. And he's like, do you want it more complicated or kind of simple? I'm like, no, let's go simple and bright with this one. So it's just very basic, and he'll come back with something. Now, if there's changes at that point, then we'll go back and forth. But I'm pretty loose with that because we put out a lot of stuff. Now, if something just isn't working and it's just like, no, it's not working, we'll can it, or we'll just keep working at it. Sometimes it's a minor fix where it's like, oh, that looks great, but don't do that. Sometimes the studio jumps in and says you can't do the title like that, and you're like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. But what else you can do? You gotta, it does suck sometimes, but even when you know the limitations, sometimes they throw a wrench in the works. We're like, you got to be kidding me. And then sometimes, like, funny enough, like recently, we're going to, one of the things we had to do with Evil Dead Rise, that came up really quick on us, and we didn't have a lot. We had almost no time, and we really wanted to get the shirts printed in time for the film. And so there was, I mean, when I say crunch time, it was crunch time. And we had Kyle and Joe, who's our marketing director. He's on our team. He's just an incredible designer in his own right. So he'll do a lot of stuff too. And he had done some designs. Kyle done some designs. And I was actually sitting here, and it was like Wednesday night, and we had to get this stuff like into the studio. So, I mean, Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert, they could all look at it and tell us, if it was okay. We didn't have time for an Osborne, we didn't have time for the illustrated ones. I said, guys, we need a cheese grater design. Like, we need one. We have to have one. And I literally was like, I sat here and in about 25 minutes came up with the design you see on the shirt. And it's, well, it got altered a little bit because they wanted to make sure the logo could be read better. Mine was actually like more like deep red blood dripping on the thing, but it was basically the same thing. And it was just like out of necessity, because I was like, it was like 7:00 one night. And I'm like, we need it and we need to get it now. So I'm like, screw it, let me go do it. And I was like, boom, boom, boom. I mean, obviously it's not an award-winning piece of art. I get it. But at the same time, it's like when you have a vision, you got to get it done. You just do it and get on with it,
You can't miss an opportunity like that too. When you have a scene that is going to be so like iconic and talked about, you have to capitalize on it.
Well, we had wanted our Tansky, again, he's our product director, manager. He had this great idea to do the grader as the high-rise building in the city, and we're like, oh my god, that's brilliant. But one or two people had done it as a fan art, and we're like, oh, shit, I don't want to copy that idea now, but let's reach out to them and see if we're able to use it, pay them and give them credit, obviously, and like, of course. But I don't think they ever got back to us, so we decided to can that idea, because I just didn't. Look, there are a lot of times where people have the same idea. It just happens. And sometimes we put it out. We didn't know somebody else had the same idea or did it. I can't scan, millions of pieces of art on millions of platforms to see if someone's thought of this idea before. But if we think of something and we see someone had done it, and we're like, yeah, we're not going to do it unless we can use theirs, especially if theirs is really good. And this one really was great. I wish we could,
Now, for like the Evil Dead Rise, will the company sometimes send you guys like a screener copy of the films to kind of like get an idea of what type of merch you guys want to put out? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so Evil Dead Rise was mostly just photos from the set and the movie. The problem with a lot of, so like Halloween, for example, like Halloween 2018, we got the script and we got images of Michael way in advance, like February, March, before that movie ever came out. Halloween Kills, we got images before the movie came out, and Halloween Ends we did, but it was close. The problem is this: when you're doing a shirt, like, at least this in my mind, this is what it is. When you're doing a shirt collection for a movie that hasn't been released yet, you can't show, well, the studio is not going to let you show a lot of things. Like, we couldn't show Corey on our shirts for the Halloween Ends, and I get that. I knew the storyline, I knew what was going to happen for the most part for that movie, but you can't illustrate him on a shirt, and I get that. But like, us as fans, we have only seen the trailer. So for Evil Dead Rise, we only knew about Mommy's with the Maggots Now and the cheese grater. And we only knew moments that they chose for us. If I had shown something that was in the movie that you hadn't seen yet, you wouldn't be as, we can do a collection now and show more stuff because the movie's out.
Yeah.
But like, we wanted to make sure the moments, like for Halloween, it was different because Michael's Michael. So we can show him in different ways where you might not have seen that exact pose in the trailer. But I mean, it's Michael Myers and he looks badass. So that you can kind of have a little bit more artistic license with it. But there were still moments like the Halloween 2018, we showed him in the closet because you saw that in the trailer, you know? I think you have to pull out those moments that people have already resonated with to make them want to go see the movie when you're launching a collection in time for the movie. Post that, you can kind of do whatever you want within the studio limitations. So once in a while we'll get screeners and stuff, but again, look, the thing about a screener is just as cool to see the movie before it comes out, right? Like that's really the part. But very cool. Rarely it's because we've come up with these great ideas that we want to do with our collection before the movie comes out. It's usually limited to the assets we're given and the trailer, just to kind of have something that people really dig, you know?
Yeah. Now, what are the top 3 sold Fright Rag designs to this day?
Oh man. So it's I gotta really do some forensic analysis, right? Yeah. So I know at one point, and this has probably been surpassed over the years because we've grown significantly since then, but What Would Jason Do was one of our best-selling shirts of all time. Same with Zombie versus Shark, which had many lives because of, well, What Would Jason Do had many lives. It was in 30 Rock, so that got a bump, and we had it in Hot Topic for a little while, and that got a bump and all this stuff. And then Zombie versus Shark was in This Is the End, so that got a bump in that movie, which is really cool. But up now, I mean, shoot, Halloween's still probably our biggest seller. I mean, I will say one shirt that we used to do these things, and you guys probably remember it, called Midnight Madness. It was 24 hours.
I was trying to think of what the name of it was, because that was my favorite. I used to like look forward to those releases all the time.
So I will say this. So early on, when we were doing Midnight Madness, Kimmy, who started working with us, she's been with me now 10 years. This was, trying to remember the year, getting a little fuzzy with the details. It was probably within the first year or two she started working with us. I think it was only the first year, right? So it was probably 2015. Anyway, she is by far the biggest Hocus Pocus fan ever in the world. Like, just she saw it 3 times, like the same day it came out when she was like 10. I mean, no joke. Her parents took her 3 times because she kept wanting to see it. So this woman is, I mean, she owns not only multiple copies of it on DVD, but she has multiple copies of it on her DVR. Okay. Like the same movie. And it's just amazing. So my point is, back in 2014, to be honest, not many people were talking about Hocus Pocus. It wasn't what it is today. And now it's got the sequel, and like it's an everywhere spirit and stuff like that. It's not that people weren't talking about it. It's just, it wasn't in the zeitgeist as it is kind of nowadays, you know? So we were thinking of ideas for Midnight Madness. And a lot of times, look, Midnight Madness for 24 hours, a lot of times the stuff wasn't licensed anyway. We just did it for fun, right? And she goes, hey, would you want to do Hocus Pocus? And I was like, yeah, let's try it. I mean, look, it's kind of, you know, no harm, no foul, because it's only 24 hours. It's a pre-order. We only sell 2. I mean, yeah, we have some costs with the art and stuff. Don't get me wrong. That costs money, but you know, I'll try most anything. Right. And she's like, oh, would you want to do that? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And we got this design done by a guy that we used a lot at the time, named Babrar. And I really liked the artwork, and she loved it, which made me happy because I wanted her to like it too. Like, I knew the movie. It's not like I didn't know the movie, but when you have a real fan that like loves it, it's like, okay, cool. Like, you know, we were, so it was midnight to midnight, and it was midnight, and she and I were on the phone. We're like, all right, it's going to launch, you know? Holy shit. I mean, I think we ended up selling, no joke, I think we sold over 1,600 that day.
Wow.
And that was like 10 years ago, right? And I mean, I was blown away by the outpouring of demand for that shirt. It was incredible. And so she was just over the moon. She's like, you know, thank you for taking a chance on this. So I was like, holy shit. Like, I keep like, Jesus, like, oh my God, it's going up by like the hundreds at this point, you know? Because we hadn't, I mean, other Midnight Madnesses had done well, but not that well. And certainly not for a property that, you know, that we weren't 100% sure on. So you just never know with people, you know?
That's awesome. Yeah, because I told Dave all the time, like when I would try to get shirts, I remember them just going so fast in my size. I would just have to buy like a size that I even fit just to have a shirt, you know. And then you guys started to do the reprint from the grave and everything like that. I was like, oh man, like thank God, you know, because or just seeing them in some of the the shops now, like when we go to sale, I'm like, oh, that's the one that we need, you know. So that's awesome.
Yeah. You did one of Friday the 13th 5 with Roy and the and I fucking shrunk it. And I was devastated because I was like, that design, I was like, that's not coming back. And I was so upset about that. There's another one I didn't buy it, but it always made me laugh when I think about it. Was Shelly from Friday the 13th wearing the Jason mask.
Larry has become a friend of mine, which is funny because Friday Part 3 is my favorite Friday film of all time. And Larry's, you probably know this, but he's a copyright attorney out in LA. And we've actually hired him on many occasions for certain things. And but he's become a friend of mine and stuff. And I can't remember if I think I call him up on this idea and I was like, hey, Shelly, hey, Larry, like, we want to do this idea. What do you think? He goes, oh, I think that'd be great. He has one. He wears it to shows and stuff. It's great. But it's so funny because, like, yeah, like, it's just, you got to put Shelly in the mask. It's seeing his hair stick out.
Yeah.
It's so good.
That one always made me laugh. Yeah.
That
stuck with me. So
yeah,
I used to love them. They always creative designs. You knew that it was like, sometimes I would like have like a 5-minute debate in my head, like, should I buy this? No, I got to buy it. It's only for 24 hours. You have to buy it. You have to.
Yeah. We're gonna, we're trying to think of ways to bring some of those things back. I mean, like, I don't like, I very much respect the fact that customers, trust us, and I don't want to hurt that trust in terms of like what we say we do. And I'm very conscious of that, and some people have called us out on it, and with good reason, where the Lost Boys thing or the Beetlejuice thing, and it's like, why'd you bring this back? And there are times that I justify it, and it's hard to say why, but it's more about like you guys just said, like, hey, I grew out of it, or I shrunk it, or it ripped, or whatever. And to me, it's like a t-shirt, it is a collectible to a degree, but it's also a utilitarian piece of art, if you will. And I don't think it's always bad. I mean, again, it's never, look, if you really think about it, most of our stuff's limited to some degree because it's not always going to be available all the time. We just can't do that, period, no matter how big we get. And we just have too many designs in the past. So there's always an element of collectability or limited availability of these things, period, no matter what. So, we have been flirting, especially now that's our 20th anniversary, we've been flirting with these things. Like today, we just put out Ginny's Revenge. That was never necessarily, that wasn't a Midnight Madness, but it was a limited release back in the day. But like, you know what? It's, Amy Steele's birthday's coming up, and she's a friend of mine, and I'm like, we should release it for her birthday. And
it's a beautiful shirt too. Like when I saw that you re-released that, I was like, that's awesome. Because that one is definitely one of the best designs for that move. I
love it. And it gives people a chance that have only known about us for like 2 years to get one. That's the other thing. Like there's a lot of people like, I've only known about you guys for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and I've missed out on so many designs. And it's hard. Again, I'm not saying that everything we do is, right. We're just trying, right? And sometimes you piss people off, unfortunately, but we never do it. We're not doing it just to piss people off or to try to, it's there's always a reason, but not always everyone agrees with us, and I understand that. But we're also just, for as many people that might not like that, there's so many people that like, thank you for putting that back out because I lost mine, or I lost in a fire, or whatever, all the stories. So
and that was the thing too. It was just like, I was like, thank you so much for releasing the Lost Boys collection, because I missed out on that when it first came out. Because I remember when that first came out, I had a newborn. My kids were smaller, so it was like at times I was like, I can't justify 100%. Spending that right now because I got to buy diapers and all this other stuff. So just to get it the other day, and then going out till I went like to the arcade bar, and then when I was going in, the girl was like, "I got the Lost Boys out." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I do."
That's awesome.
So I had to tell her, like, because growing up, that was one of my favorite films. So
he bought the whole collection. He bought all.
I got it all.
Well, the cool thing was those two, the vampire shirts, I'd want to do those for many years. And to be completely honest, we were just going to do them because we didn't really know anything about who did the art. But a friend of mine, Justin Ishmael, he contacted me out of nowhere and he was like, hey, I own the art to those. Like I can license it to you. And I was like, he's like, are you interested in these? I'm like, well, yes. And I'm glad we can do it like officially. And I was like, well, shit, we should bring Boys of Santa Carla back, because we had done that as Midnight Madness, but it was actually on I think it was a German or an Italian steelbook. We had licensed, we licensed that out for an official steelbook. And people have asked us about that for years. I'm like, we could bring that back again just as a limited thing, and and we did. So, and same thing with Jenny's Revenge and a few other ones that we're doing this year. It's like, let's have some fun, plus I'm like, shit, man, we've been doing this a long time. I just want to bring some stuff back and have a little fun, It's a shirt, it's a t-shirt, you know what I mean? Like it's just,
Well, you say that, but one of the things I actually will give you a lot of credit for is like Fright Rags has put out some releases that actually like stand for something. And I appreciate that, because I think it's it's one thing for, as a business, it can be kind of risky, right? You put yourself out there, you represent a community. There's always like another side of that that's like maybe going to give you some backlash, right? I bought your Shutter Black Lives Matter shirt. That was I saw that. I was like, I definitely have to have that. I know you've done a few other releases, and I think that's awesome. Like, so good for you for being able to have fun with something, but also be able to like also stand up for causes that you feel are worth being involved in. So I think that's pretty cool to be able to have that ability.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in that regard, because we've been able to work with Shutter on those shirts and Fangoria on the Pride shirts that we do.
Yes.
And I'm always thrilled, especially when it's a collaboration like that, because it's companies that I admire, and to kind of work together to be a force together is really cool. I mean, I think when we did the Black Lives Matter stuff, that raised like $87,000 that month.
That's awesome.
And the other thing is, in the Pride shirts we've done with Fangoria the last few years, I mean, it started out, the funniest thing about that is it started out as a joke, and I don't mean a joke about Pride. I mean a joke about, I was literally in Las Vegas at a licensing show, and I was like at my favorite cigar bar having a cigar and a mojito, and I was on Twitter, and my friend Phil, who's the editor-in-chief at Fango, someone had complained about Fangoria because their cover didn't have any red on it, and said, where are the reds? And it was because their logo happened to not be red on that cover. So people are like posting other people's logos, like, where are the reds? Like, it was just a stupid joke, and like they were doing our logo and other companies. And we were making fun, because it was like, come on, like, it doesn't have to have red on it, And I remember leaving that bar, and I was walking up the street, and I walked back to my hotel, which was all the way down the strip, and I just started thinking about things, and I was like, what if we did, because I think someone may have mentioned a rainbow one or something, right? Like, just in passing. I was like, shit, what if we did a rainbow one and we did it for Pride Month? Like, and we were able to give money to charity. And I was gonna, when I got back to my hotel, I meant to text Phil, and he texted me, he goes, would you want to do a rainbow one for Pride Month? And I was like, yes. I'm like, and the funny thing is, I love when people give a shit about that. I love it, because everyone's like, go woke, go broke, or they're like, slap a rainbow on it, it's called money. And I'm like, what part of 100% of the profits do you not understand? Like, we're not making anything. Like, in fact, we're making negative money, because we're spending money on
the product.
But like thousands of orders that we have to package, that we're paying labor for, that is not getting recouped by anything, right? So that to me, when we do stuff like that, and it's like, not every time is 100%, because depending on certain situations, but most of the time that's what we do. I mean, and I like doing that, because it really, to me, it's like, it's not, what are you going to argue about? We're literally giving 100% of the money away. So how are we making money off this? I never do it as a profit center, ever, but even the Joe Bob stuff, I mean, that was all 100%. I think there's only been a couple of times we might have done like 20 or 50%, because it was a different situation for like, breast cancer or something, whatever. I can't even remember now, but in recent memory, I can't remember any other than doing 100% of the profits. And like, I don't know, it feels really good to be in a position to have a company that can do something like that, where you're like, hey, we're going to do this one thing. People really like it. They're supporting us by supporting these charities. And we're just able to take all this money and just go, here, take it. Like, you know, I mean, that's awesome.
The people that support you are going to, and support Fright Rags, are going to be into it. The people who just love critiquing people are going to shit on it like they do. And then there's the people that don't support the causes that are going to give backlash. And so everybody's, they have their own lane, but like, just, I think on our end, we just appreciate, your ability to kind of like say, like, this is, these are our views and we're going to put this out and we're going to do something charitable. I think that's important. And like you said, if the fact that you're in a position to be able to do it, that's awesome. So congrats for even being able to be in a position where you have that opportunity and you're utilizing your platform for good.
No, and it does feel good. It's just one of those things where you're like, why wouldn't you do that, as a business, And so, I mean, I remember the first time we ever did something like that. A friend of mine, she had stage 4 breast cancer, and she was a really good friend of mine from high school. And it's like, I was in this position, like, what do you, I got to do something. Like, you just want to help. And like, I remember going out for a run, and I just had this vision in my head of that Michael Jackson cover, or Rolling Stone cover with Janet Jackson, her breasts and so on. I'm like, dude, we should do Frankenstein holding Bride of Frankenstein's breasts, and we'll donate the money to her. And this is like 13, 14 years ago. And when you have those ideas, you're like, this is either really good or really dumb. Like, I don't know what it is. It's either a really bad idea, and I'm gonna get shit for it, or it's a really good idea. Well, that was, and again, it was such a smaller company at the time, just me and like one other person, and we raised like $8,000 from my friend. And I remember writing that check, and it was just for one person. It wasn't like a charity. Like, they were supporting my friend. And to me, that spoke volumes, and it really like put that idea in my head. I'm like, holy shit! Like, they came out to support my friend. I mean, yes, they were getting a shirt for it, but still, they were supporting it. So I was like, okay.
That's the horror community, though. They will come out and support 100%. Whether it's like local or small, like filmmakers and artists, or support causes. Like, when we first started, we used to, before we had to put money into doing rights, we would do small screenings and like raise money for like animal shelters and
Toys for Tots
and stuff. And like, the people just would come out and like throw money into it, and I'm like, oh, you guys are awesome. Like, people, it's such a funny thing, because people have this idea of what horror fans and are supposed to be like, and they're not. They absolutely love animals. They love good causes. They love feel good stories, and then they love murder, and that's fine.
No, you're 100% right. It's this weird dichotomy of like people that are into blood and guts but will give so much. You're 100% right. I mean, that's, again, being part of the horror community in that way is like, it gives back so much that it's amazing.
I think that's what kind of makes everything kind of always feel worth it, when you have moments where you can connect with people and realize like this community is like, does have such a good backbone. Obviously every community has like the little outliers, and
of course. I get more excited when we put stuff out like that. I mean, obviously I'm always excited when we put things out, but when we do a charity thing, you're almost like, how much can we raise? I mean, I'll tell you, when Joe Bob asked us to do his Christmas, when he does his Christmas auction stuff, it was like the second year in, and he asked me, he's like, hey, would you want to do like a shirt and like hoodie and stuff? I'm like, yeah, let's work it out. And I was sitting there, and it's funny, my parents were over and we were watching Christmas Vacation, because it's a yearly tradition with us. And I'm looking, and we had just launched, and I was like, oh my God. Because like, $150 gets you a shirt and a hoodie and whatever, and which is, a lot more than what a shirt and a hoodie would cost. You know what I mean? It's not cheap. But 100% of the profits are going to these charities. And I'm like, we just raised like $112,000 in like 3 days. Like, holy shit. That's money that we're literally taking in and just going, here you go. And like, on top of what he raised, which was like another 50 or 60, I was like, whoa. And we did it 2 years in a row, and we're doing it again this year. I'm like,
awesome.
it is such a cool feeling to see that. Like I get so excited, and it's it's like
That's
it's great,
amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So Ben, I know that we've kept you on here for a while, so I appreciate you hanging in here with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But before we wrap up, I just had a couple of things I wanted to ask you. The first thing is like, what can you tell us, if you can tell us anything about upcoming projects or future Fright Rags releases, anything you're excited about?
Well, one thing I'm definitely excited about this year is Halloween, because it's the 45th anniversary. So we're going out to LA to the convention, and we have got a lot of convention exclusives. It was crazy at the 40th, and I mean, we were overwhelmed by how many people came out. Obviously to the show in general, of course, but I mean, we had a line all weekend of people waiting to get stuff from us, which was, I've never experienced anything quite like that before, and which was incredibly humbling. And this time around, we are doing a lot of like exclusive stuff. So we've got variant figures coming out. We're doing a mini mask. We've got other stuff coming out. It's going to be crazy. So definitely that's something. And then again, anything that's not sold there will be available online right after. We've got, I'm trying to think of more sooner with things coming out. Next month, we're actually finally putting out our first official Frankenhooker collection, which is going to be fun.
Nice.
And we've got the Prowler and City of the Living Dead coming up. So some smaller, I don't want to say obscure titles, but the smaller titles just as good. There are some new movies we're going to be doing this year, newer movies. We are still working on our Megan and Renfield collection, which we're hoping to get out soon. And then later this year, we should be doing stuff for the new Exorcist movie, which I'm looking forward to. So always a lot in the works. We've actually got a lot of things that I can't talk about, but a lot of things that we've been having a lot of meetings lately. There's this sort of, when you said morphing earlier, Dave, this is kind of this next evolution that we're getting into. Yeah, I can't really say anything about it, but there's a lot that we have in the works that will start unfolding over the next few months.
Okay.
I'm really excited. We always try to change things up, and we're always trying to do new things, obviously, and it's not that I never not get excited, but there are times where you just kind of sit back and go, okay, what are we doing? Like, where are we going? Like, where is all this going? And there's been a few things over the last 3 or 4 months that are starting to crystallize in my brain that I've been writing a lot about and talking to my team about, where I'm like, I can see something for the next few years where I'm like, I think there's a direction that we're heading. And, you start sniffing around, you're like, I think we're going to go over here now. Okay. And in addition to, I know I'm being very vague, and I apologize. I talk more about it. I don't want to be so like obscure about it, but that's the best way I can describe it without actually saying what it is. But I can tell you that everything we're doing, we're trying to think of the customer experience and their journey with us. Like, that's where it comes from. There's a lot of things that I'm only thinking of now that I didn't think about before, because it makes sense to me now from a customer perspective. I'm not even really talking as much about, again, we always have to make money and profit and all those things, but like at the end of the day, like, what is the customer journey like? What are they getting out of this? What is it? Does it make sense for that person? Does it make sense for them to do that or buy that or get access to this or do this? Or what is this like? If it doesn't make sense, then why do it? Like, even if it's going to make you more money, like if it doesn't have that feeling of like being a part of us, then I don't want to do it. So it all comes from there. So I'm really excited about what we've got our hands into. It's just going to be a lot of work and a lot of mental gymnastics and logistics to figure out, but that stuff we'll figure out.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So we'll be keeping a close eye then on the newsletters. So if listeners don't already subscribe, make sure you drop your email we'll go to frightrags.com and put your email address in there to subscribe to the newsletter. I love those. I love the the upcoming features, like showing what's coming up every month. It's exciting. Like I get the email and I'm like, oh shit, later in the month I got to pay attention to this one. I just little things. It's little things in life, man. But you guys,
hey, I'm the same way, so don't get me wrong. Like I get things like that from other companies, whatever. I'm like, ooh.
I feel like you guys get it though. Like you guys really do get it. It's those little things that make people excited and make the experience a little just feel a little more personal, right? So definitely make sure you guys check that out. And there's always, if you haven't bought a Fright Rags shirt, I'd be shocked, but if you haven't, go on the website and there's usually a discount code for your first purchase, I believe.
Absolutely.
So make sure you check that out. Ben, this has been awesome. Really, really enjoyed talking to you, man. Thank you for taking this much time. It was way more than we expected from you, but this was cool. Also, think about a brain scan drop at some point in time. Yes. I'm gonna drop that plug. Brandon got his Lost Boys. I need my brain scan. And maybe a PVD horror collab. I'll just put that out there.
There you go. All right. Awesome.
We're only like 3 years, no, maybe more than that, hours away, I was gonna say, but we're just a little ride over. But
awesome.
Yeah, thanks again, Ben, and we appreciate it. And thank you for just giving us closets full of shirts.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you for the support, first of all, and thank you for having me. No, it's a blast talking to you guys.
Awesome. No problem.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. And like I said, make sure you check out Fright Rags and all the exciting stuff that they have coming down the pike. I think we're in for a treat. So
definitely.
Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Take care.